Okay, welcome, friends. I am so excited to have ES with us today, one half of OE Tearmann. And we're gonna hear all sorts of interesting things. I have a really good feeling about this conversation. So, the first question I usually ask is, how does it feel to be in your body on this planet at this time?
That is such a hard question to answer, I'm not gonna lie. Um,
Which is why I ask it.
at this particular moment, decent. Um, I struggle with depression and anxiety, and that's
Mhm.
doing pretty well right now, but also I have tendonitis in my arm that's acting up, which is not ideal. So,
Mm.
like,
Mhm.
mentally, yay, physically, not so yay.
Yeah, I love that answer because it's really about like this present moment, and any present moment I feel like ends up being a mixed bag, and
Yeah.
it's like how do we navigate
Well,
that like
and I overthink things, so a lot of the times when I try to think of this current moment, my brain is actually thinking like 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes in the
mhm.
future or whatever. So
Mhm.
having having that moment of like, okay, this is the actual moment that we're living in is difficult but useful.
Yeah, super useful, right? Because the whole system trains us to be like, what do you feel bad about in the past? And what are you
Mhm.
worried about in the future? And that's like the point of reference for every single decision.
It really is. I mean, we start asking kids like in kindergarten what they want to be when they grow up. And I've
Yeah.
never had an answer for that.
So 5-year-old ES, like what was going on about like who am I in the planet when you were at that age?
Oh gosh. When I was five-ish, I was into everything. I think around that time was when I started having a giant list of what I wanted to be when I grew up. I wanted to be
Hmm.
a ballerina, oceanographer, paleontologist on the moon, or something of that nature. Never mind that there aren't oceans or dinosaurs on the moon
That we know of.
that we know of that we found yet. Um,
That's
I
amazing.
definitely was in the you can do anything you put your mind to camp.
Yeah, and big imagination, it sounds like, yeah?
Yes, I've always had big imagination, which is why I write fiction now.
Yes, so that is one of the pieces about you that I'm so excited to hear more about because, like we talked about at the beginning, this is all about exploring, like, how do you figure out how to be on this planet? And, when I was reading about your writing, what came to mind was, like, Afrofuturism.
Mhm.
um, because it has that element of like reclaiming and envisioning futures not disassociated from the struggles that we've been through, but like not totally oppressed by them.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, how did your imagination in those early years shape or influence the way that you were showing up for your depression and anxiety? I don't know when all that came in, but talk a little bit about that.
Oh, ooh, that's a big one. So my mental health started going downhill in like high school,
Mhm.
but I didn't put names to it and start seeking help until like the last decade.
Mm.
Um, so that's a 20-year gap. I mean, not quite, but close.
Mm.
Um, and so for me, it's kind of hard to look back and connect the imagination and the mental health issues.
Mhm.
Um, but it is definitely something that I and my co-writer incorporate into our stories, partially as a way to provide catharsis for ourselves,
Yeah.
and partially as a way to invite other people, our readers, to look at their own health and
Mhm.
to realize that there's not something wrong. with having depression, having anxiety, being queer, any of those things. And if you need help, it's okay to ask for help,
Mm-hmm.
because our society still highly, highly stigmatizes mental health, um, especially in someone with a female presenting body.
Right.
So that is definitely something that it is one of the cores of the
Mm-hmm.
books and of the way that we use that fiction to cope
Mm-hmm.
with the craziness of the world right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And so is there an element with which, like you talked about, like it's almost like a catharsis, like you're like creating characters that maybe do you give your characters more access to support than you were
Oh yeah,
given?
yeah. Um, so for example, Aiden, who's the protagonist of the Aces High Jokers Wild series, is very heavily inspired by myself and my experiences,
Mm-hmm.
um, with anxiety, with depression, with not being cisgender. He's more binary than I am.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things we really wanted as we were writing this, as we were coming up with this world, was to say what were the things that we would have liked.
I love that.
What support would we have wanted to see?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot easier to access transgender health resources. He has a holographic therapist on his data pad that he can access at any time.
That's so cool.
He, the found family is all very much,
Mm.
hey, lean on us. We're here for you. We're a family. We support each other. Um, yeah, there was a lot of just what would I have wanted to see,
Yeah.
and then put it into a sci-fi-ish solar punky setting.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. I have gone through like a coach's training program,
Mhm,
and one of the tools that they actually taught was to take your present self and go back and like be a source of encouragement and support to your past self,
mhm.
like in sort of a meditative, imaginary kind of way. And I feel like the writing is such a beautiful way to acknowledge to that high school self, like, hey, you weren't a problem. Like, you just didn't have the
They
tools
didn't have
and
the
the
support you needed,
resources. Yeah.
and that's not your fault. As
Yeah.
any individual, that's not your fault.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you had had the access to these things, like maybe you would have been able to navigate the circumstances in a different way.
Mhm,
And the like almost taking the, because I just speaking for myself, I know that dealing with my queer identity without any resources for that sort of same 20-year span, 11 to 21, um, I felt so much shame about how I handled it because I didn't handle it skillfully. I like
because
made a mess of everything.
you didn't have the resources, you didn't have the role models.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that is really cool about where we're at right now, is that the resources and the role models are way more readily available. And there are more and more people saying, hey, I'm here, I am this identity, or I struggle with this issue, or whatever. And I can't speak for everyone, but there are a lot of people out there now who are just saying, hey, come ask me questions. I
Yeah.
will, like, not legally, but I will adopt you.
Yeah.
As I will be your adopted transparent, because we all need
Yeah.
one. And that's really cool, and sometimes easy to lose sight of when you look at the news and how terrifying everything is.
Yeah, like there's more than enough scary to focus on, but there's also this other world that exists now that you and I didn't have.
And I
Um,
mean, even looking at fiction,
yeah.
when I first started writing in high school, which was early 2000s, um, there was not much queer fiction at all. And what was there was basically erotica.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
it is either cis male male or cis female female, erotica, very fetishized, very
Right.
not great. Um, and then there was fanfic,
Mm-hmm.
and that was about it. And now you look at the shelves, and we've got coming out stories, we've got general love stories, we've got all sorts of more representation, and it's freaking amazing.
It is. It's so extraordinary and so healing for those young
Oh,
parts.
it is.
Like I said, I have a 12-year-old, and when we go to the YA section, I'm like picking out books for me because I'm like,
Mhm.
my 13-year-old self like needs to read these books and needs to feel like these feelings of like, oh, I could have just like explored these experiences and felt like they made sense.
Have the verbiage to
Yeah.
express these things.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
100%.
So,
Honestly, one of the best moments I've had with this series is Olivia, my co-writer, and I, we go to a lot of cons,
mhm.
and every now and then we'll get a trans teen or young adult who will come up and just be like, "Thank you so much for writing this book, this series, because I actually saw myself on the page for the first time." Because Aiden's identity is a huge part of the story and it's a huge part of his character arc, but it's not the story.
Mhm.
He doesn't
Exactly.
exist just to be a trans character dealing with trans issues.
Right.
Um, and but those, yeah, those moments are just like, okay, that's why I do this,
Exactly.
because no one did it for me. I can do it for someone else.
Yeah. And like you're doing it for you now,
Yeah.
right? Because that little self is probably like, not that it makes it better, like all better, but like I would imagine it really helps that part of you to be like, it wasn't a waste. Like,
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
amazing, amazing. So going back, it sounds like you started like exploring mental health stuff and queer identity around high school, is that right? And you started writing then too?
Yeah, high school was a lot of change for me. I guess I technically started writing in like middle school, but I got
Mhm.
really serious about it in high school.
Mhm.
And started going to writing conventions or writing conferences and studying publication and studying all the steps to
Mhm.
get there. And here we are now, and I have co-written 8 books. The eighth is coming out this summer, fall, somewhere in there. And I have several short stories that I've published myself. Um, so yeah, don't give up on your dreams.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Even though society says it's stupid, do it.
Yeah, yeah, so powerful, and so powerful to have something that feels like it's beautiful enough to be called a dream. An interesting, there's been, I've now, I think you are like my 15th episode, maybe, somewhere in there. And the thread with almost everyone has been people most often say connecting with nature and writing almost are like always
Oh,
things that people point to as helping them navigate being on this planet. And I am pretty sure that none of the other people are like authors, right? Like they're not official writers, but writing has been a really important part of like supporting
mhm.
their journey. So, what do you think in those early years, especially, what do you think writing allowed for you or opened up for you?
I've always been a bibliophile, and for lack of a better term, the escapism of books and stories. And so writing kind of allowed me to take that and make it my own. I want to step into a different world. I want to explore something with magic and spaceships and whatever, and apply my own rules to it. And so when I first started writing, I was really tired of, okay, you see 2 female archetypes, basically, in fiction. You've got the damsel in distress, and you've got the kick ass, I don't need anybody, um, screw you.
Right,
And that was it.
right. Bitter.
There was,
Yeah.
and they all, not all, for the majority, the female characters just felt really flat to me.
Yeah.
And so I started writing, okay, well, what happens when the super strong character needs a moment to be supported,
Mhm.
or when the damsel in
Mhm.
distress starts kicking ass?
Mhm.
And like, how do I make those more realistic? And how do I take the world that I'm seeing and I'm experiencing and translate that so that
Mhm.
someone else can also experience that?
Mhm.
And that's kind of what I started with, not consciously necessarily, but looking back, okay.
Yeah.
Um, and definitely what I still try to do now, because for me, it just helps me frame my own experiences, but also if I can help someone else see that they're not alone or help inspire someone else while I'm doing that, like bonus.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I love that you mentioned like taking out some of the rules or questioning some of the rules. I feel like that is the number one like tactic for having more like autonomy and liberation in terms of mental health. I feel like it's something that queer people do incredibly well, is be like, you're telling me there's this rule and it doesn't make sense to me, right? And we see neurodivergent people do this really well too. Like, you're telling me A, B, and C is how things are done, but my brain is
That
not.
doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, my brain is saying something else, and I've decided like my brain is more important than your random rule. And I feel like that's something else that is really important for people who talk or think about like reality creation or like manifestation too. It's like we don't need to look at life through the lens of what we're told is possible.
Mhm.
We can be like, I can imagine something outside of those things. So that means it's possible if I can imagine it. So I
And for
wonder,
me,
yeah.
that's one of the reasons I like world building and I like fantasy, because I can take fantasy and sci-fi. I can take, the fantasy tropes and say, you know what, these are too white for me.
Mm-hmm.
I need more racial representation. How am I going to develop that in a world that makes sense for this fantasy setting, but is also respectful
Mm-hmm.
and interesting and engaging? And it's, for me, it's kind of like a puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a really fascinating puzzle of all
Mm-hmm.
these different pieces. Um, and I mean, a lot of people see, white cis het as the default.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I sit down to write, I'm coming from a place of, well, everyone is queer and everyone's probably neurodivergent unless I specify on the page. And there's just something so freeing for me to be able to sit down for a minute and just exist in that world where everyone is queer and neurodivergent and not white.
Right.
Um, like Olivia, my co-writer, is quarter Menominee. She's Irish and Menominee, and so she has a really interesting point of view. I wish she could have been here today, but she has a really interesting point of view where she grew up on a reservation.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at her, she looks very white passing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so incorporating things like that, of the surface isn't the whole thing.
Yeah.
It makes for fascinating storytelling, but it also makes for fascinating reflections of the self.
Yes. When you have to think that hard about a character's characteristics, I would think that it makes you think hard about your own characteristics.
Oh yeah. And there's so many unconscious things we've absorbed,
Mhm.
society and through the media we absorbs. Like for example, a lot of villains are queer and Jew coded,
Mhm.
especially in Disney and in a lot of, actually, in like everything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so is that something that I am unconsciously bringing as well?
Yeah.
Or dark equals evil, light equals good,
Yes. Oh my gosh.
which
So
is
much. Yeah.
very, very racist at its core.
So, yeah.
Is that something I'm unconsciously perpetuate or
Perpetuating.
I'm a writer, not a talker.
You're doing great.
Um, so it just, yeah. And then once you, for me at least, once I started thinking about that in my writing, it
Yeah.
made me start thinking about it more in my life as well. Because I didn't want to include those stereotypes and include those harmful things in my world. So why am I allowing those to be included in my headspace?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wish I had an easy answer to just like pluck them out and throw them away. But being conscious of them and actively catching them is a start.
Oh my gosh, it's everything, right? And that's exactly like the difference between a rule-based life, which is completely unconscious, like you told me, and now I'm doing it,
Mhm.
to a conscious, like choice-making creator life is, oh, I'm going to look at the set of information and then I'm going to make a choice or a decision about it rather than just reverting to what this external authority said. That's so incredible. Are there ways that you see yourself now in terms of like navigating your day to day and supporting yourself mental health wise, where you can see that you're bringing that awareness to begin to open up to making more choices there?
Oh yeah. Um, let's see. I guess the most recent top of mind example is I've been talking with my therapist a lot lately about whether or not I'm ADHD and or on the autistic spectrum.
Hmm.
And having these discussions, I keep finding more and more preconceptions
Mm.
and stereotypes and negative thoughts and feelings that I've absorbed
Yeah.
about, well, if I claim this label, if I
Mhm.
identify or am diagnosed as autistic, people are going to think XYZ. They're going to
Mm.
think you can't talk and I can't communicate and I can't um, make friends and I always
Mhm.
hyper focus. And scientifically, that's wrong because one of my pet peeves about medical things, like until recently, all of the studies have been on one very tiny specific
Yeah.
subset of people who all present the same way.
Yep.
And autism in particular is a very, very individual thing. Um, but there's that, like every time I think about, am I on this spectrum? There's some other part of me that's going,
Mm.
no, you can't be because of all of these negative connotations and all of these things you don't fit, despite all of this
Yeah,
stuff
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
does fit.
It's like finding the two examples that are
Yeah.
not perfectly matched and then trying to rule it out. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so it definitely, I do have that conscious, like constantly questioning myself
Yeah.
and constantly questioning, is this an actual accurate statement and an actual
Hmm.
accurate feeling that I have? Or is it something that I've absorbed from
Hmm.
society or from my parents or from the medical system telling me XYZ?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to lie, it's exhausting.
Yeah. Constantly having to be differentiating between your programming and like what you really think. And it sounds like you meet with a therapist, yeah, to
Yeah,
support you in that process, which is an awesome tool to reach for because it can be like become very circular in our own heads, right?
100%.
What are
And
some
just
of
an
the,
external validation of, no, you're not making a mountain out of a molehill. It's okay.
yeah, like someone to say you make sense is so
Yes,
powerful.
100%.
And what else do you reach for in terms of supporting you with being able to navigate the overwhelm of like, I'm trying to sort through and create my own reality and not just go according to these rules?
Uh, I'm really, really lucky, and I have an amazing support group of friends who are all also neurodivergent. And funny, we run in packs.
Mhm.
Um, and so I have a lot of conversations with them of, hey, I'm feeling this kind of way, and I
Mhm.
just need to word vomit at you. Um, and again, that validation of, hey, we get it, we've experienced something
Yeah.
similar,
Yeah.
is huge.
Yeah.
Um, and there are a lot of really cool neurodivergent communities online now.
Amazing.
Again, something we didn't have,
Hmm.
pre-internet when I was a wee bad. Um,
Totally.
so if you can't find those kinds of people physically in your area, definitely check online, check for local support groups. Um, yeah, there's a lot of resources out there nowadays, which is amazing.
Yeah, I love that because like a lot of us neurodivergent folks like would actually rather connect online. There's an element where that's a good thing. But yeah, a lot of people, have this like, I'm alone. I don't know anybody. Like, I don't have any friends and I don't even know how to make them like, and nobody wants to be my friend kind of a thing. And I I definitely encourage folks to check out online resources, but I also have given myself permission as a like total bibliophile to make friends with characters.
Oh,
Um and
100%.
and with authors. Like any nonfiction that I read, I feel like those authors are like my mentors and like my like close like people who are pouring into me, caring about me, and like wanting to invest in my future, in my well-being. And then my fiction, I feel like those characters become really valuable. Actually, one of my favorite stories was when in seventh grade I went to a evangelical Christian a private school, and every at the start of every Bible class they would ask like, does anyone have any prayer requests for like people who are struggling that you need prayer for? And I raised my hand and asked for prayer for a character from a book. And then like
I love that so much.
halfway through I was like, because it was like, because there's like a war going on and there's a this and everyone was looking at me like, what? And I was
What are
like,
you talking about? That's amazing.
uh, so I may have taken it a little too far, but
Well, I mean, actually, that's one of the things that I've talked to my therapist about is the support I get from fictional characters.
seriously.
Um, because for me, let's see, it was 2015, 2016.
Hmm.
I guess it was 2016 because it was election year. Um, I was the closest to suicidal I've ever been.
Mm.
And that's the year that Final Fantasy 15 came out.
What was
And
it?
Final Fantasy 15, it's a video game.
Okay.
Um, and for me, like, it sounds super dramatic, but that game saved my life because I connected with those characters
I
so
believe
well.
it. Yeah.
And this isn't really a story I tell very often, but I would not have gotten myself into therapy or on my medications if it weren't for the characters in that game. And for me, imagining what those characters would have told me and
Hmm.
wanted to support me with.
Oh
And
my
so when
gosh.
you say things like, the fictional characters are my friend, I am completely on board with that.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that because if it
Yeah.
helps you survive a world that inherently does not want you to survive,
Thank you.
freaking do it.
Thank you. I love that so much. And I love that you imagined the characters caring about you, like rooting for you, like wanting you to get through that. Like, I don't know anything about the video game, but how did that, like, do they have really good character development?
I think so. I think they're very, very believable, interesting, fun characters.
Ah,
Um, the the series itself, plot wise, makes no sense. Um, but the characters are just really, for me, really easy to relate to and to imagine as real people.
yeah. And so you were able to like experience yourself in relationship with them to the extent that they mirrored back to you your worth.
Yeah. And it's sometimes easier just to imagine it coming from someone else.
Oh my gosh, yeah,
If that's
2000%.
if that's a real person or a fictional person,
Yeah,
it's it's that concept of externalizing the thought.
yeah,
Um, and that makes it a lot easier to hear for someone whose brain automatically says, no, I'm not worth it.
yeah.
Um, and it also just, sorry, my cat is having zoomies. Um, it makes it
He's
just
like, "What are we
easier
doing?"
to internalize,
Yeah,
externalizing, if
yeah,
that
it's
makes sense.
so much easier to believe coming from someone else. There's someone named Kristen Neff, who is like a self-love, like self-compassion teacher. And her whole concept is talk to yourself like you would talk to a friend.
Mhm.
Because talking to ourselves, we have been programmed to talk to ourselves like we're the meanest person on the planet, and we would like never treat anyone in our world like that. So I absolutely adore the construct of like, let a character be the one who is speaking kindly to you. Let that character be the one who is watching out for you in the way that you wish like a loving parent or like a loving partner or loving friend would. Because at the end of the day, like that's a tool that any of us could have access to. Like if we could believe enough in this character, we could even create that character ourselves.
Yeah. And I mean, if you don't have a bond like that with a fictional character, talk to your cat or your
Yeah.
dog or
Yeah.
your pet or an imaginary pet. I was just trying to get the cat up here to say hi, and he said no.
Yeah.
Um,
He's like, nope, I'm doing my own thing right now. I'm interacting with some extraterrestrials and we're having a game of tag. Yeah, that's amazing. I love the idea of personifying something outside of yourself in order to be like the thing that is saying to you, hi, darling. Hi. It's so nice to meet you. Thank you for
it's
making
like,
me pee.
no, put me down.
I am an autonomous being. Thank you very much. I think cats are the best example of like being a source to self and not being codependent of anything I've witnessed on this planet.
Yeah.
I think that's why they were gods in like the Egyptian times, because they're like so in line with their own selves. It's amazing.
And they're really good at boundaries,
Oh my
which I'm
gosh.
really not.
Yeah. Yeah. So such powerful teachers in that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, like as you were talking about like make it your cat or make it your whatever, like I was thinking I a few years ago decided like I wanted to have stuffed animals because I have a kid and I'm like giving him stuffed animals, and I wanted to have my own stuffed animals. Like I had stuffed animals growing up and then I wanted to take them to college and my parents like shamed me about it. And they were like, people are going to make fun of you. And I internalized that, you know? And so at 40, I got myself like this amazing rainbow unicorn and I sleep with it every
Love it.
night. Yes, yes. And I, as you were speaking, was thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm going to develop, like, I'm going to start writing stories about my unicorn and like develop a full character and let the unicorn be like my like cheering squad. I love
Do
that
it.
idea.
Do it.
Right?
Yeah. No. I also had a similar experience with stuffed animals. I
Aw,
had a teddy bear that I slept with since I was born. And my parents didn't really care that I took him to college. But my roommates, because I was in the dorm and there were 6 girls in the room.
that's a lot of,
I mean,
that's
it was
a
like
lot.
so like 3 in one room, 2 in a separate room, and then
Still.
one, and we shared the living room and the bathroom.
Uh-huh. It's a lot of
Um,
energy.
and they were just like, why the fuck do you have this stuffed animal, this teddy bear?
Come on.
And I'm like, okay, fine. And so I kind of trained myself out of sleeping with it. And over the last couple of years, I realized, why did I do that? And now I have, I just moved a couple months ago and I haven't finished unpacking unpacking, so I
Mm.
still have like 3 trash bags full of stuffed animals that need to get unpacked.
Oh my gosh, I love it so much.
Um, so if it makes you happy and it's not hurting anybody else,
Right.
who cares?
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. Yeah. Okay, so just like looping back, you were in this really dark space and you said like 2015, 2016, and you got connected with this video game and you felt like through the relationship you had with characters, you were like, I need to get some help. And so what was that process like? Like, did you know that therapy existed? Did you have a lot of like baggage around that? How did that process go for you?
I knew it existed. I definitely had a lot of baggage around it. My family is great in some aspects and not great in others, like any family. But my parents, unfortunately, did really buy into mental health stigma.
Hmm.
And very much, you go to therapy when you're broken.
Hmm.
And so I resisted it for a while because I didn't want to admit that I was broken.
Right.
But eventually I did just hit that point between feeling terrible and
Hmm.
having the characters in my head say, hey, you know what? You need to talk to somebody.
Mm.
Um, I finally did just kind of break down and start researching therapists. Um, I got really, really lucky in that the
Mm.
first one that I started talking to was a great fit for me
Mm.
at the time. I saw her for 2 years. And then life happened and we stopped for a while. And I found someone new who I actually like even better. Um, that doesn't happen. It can
Yeah.
take a while to find the right therapist. I have a friend who's been through 6 or 7 now and is still trying to find someone.
Yeah.
And that can be really disheartening.
Yeah. I think it's so important to acknowledge though, because a lot of folks feel like there's something wrong with them if they can't make a connection with a therapist. And I also was a person who had to go through 6 or 7 in order to find someone who would work for me. And then like inevitably they'd like leave their job. I'd be like back in the same boat. But I
Yeah,
have found it to be a worthwhile thing to like give myself the concept that I'm interviewing them.
yeah. You're not there to be interviewed.
Hmm.
You're there to make sure that they will fit your needs.
Yeah.
Um, and it helps me at least to go in with okay, I know I don't want, a super conservative Christian person.
Mhm.
I want someone who is at least semi-aware of queer issues because
Mhm.
I want to be able to discuss gender dysphoria and things of that nature in these sessions as well, because surprise, that's also tied in with anxiety and depression. Funny how that works, right? Um, so I had like this list of things that I was looking for in someone. Some people are more comfortable with a therapist of a certain gender or a certain background, and just checking in with yourself and saying, okay, this is what I know I don't want.
Mhm.
This is kind of maybe what I think I want.
Mhm.
Um, at least for me, I find it a lot easier to think of what I don't want than what I
Oh my
do want,
gosh. Yeah, totally.
um, which can still help you narrow down and find
Yeah.
a place to start. Um, and I have done an intensive outpatient program, uh,
Mhm.
3 years ago, 2020, 2021.
Mhm.
When the pandemic was taking its toll on everybody. Um,
Yeah, tell people a little bit about what that means for anyone who hasn't.
so
I've also been an
basically,
outpatient before.
the program that I was in, I was doing in addition to my regular therapy.
Mhm.
And I went basically to the hospital. It was 3-hour sessions 3 times a week.
Mhm.
So it was 9 hours of intense therapy with other people in the program. I think there were probably 10 or 11 of us who showed up on the regular.
Mhm.
And there was a social worker or a therapist or some other mental health professional facilitating the sessions. We would talk about things. We had exercises to do. We did deep breathing exercises. They
Mhm.
taught us a lot of different crisis coping mechanisms and stress tolerance mechanisms. They did a lot of coloring. They
Yay!
always had like coloring sheets and colored
Art
pencils for us.
therapy. Yeah.
Um, and so I did that for a month and a half, 2 months.
Amazing.
And it definitely was useful, but also frustrating
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of it is based on what's called cognitive behavioral therapy,
Mm-hmm.
which is very much identifying a thought and challenging it.
Mm-hmm.
Like saying, for example, I have the thought, I'm a terrible human being,
Yeah.
and going, well, no, but I'm not, because
Mm-hmm.
here are all the good reasons,
Uh-huh.
or here are the reasons I'm not. Here are all the
Yeah.
good things I've done. And for me, when I'm in a really bad headspace, that just makes me feel worse.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the coping mechanisms that come with cognitive behavioral therapy work when I'm feeling okay
Yeah.
and not when I really, really need them to work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
And so what do you turn to in those moments?
my therapist actually does something called family systems therapy,
Yes. Internal
which
family
goes back to
systems.
externalizing,
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
imagining
Little
these,
characters.
imagining characters, imagining parts of your personality, and sitting down and having compassionate conversations and asking questions with those parts. And that works a lot better for me because I was doing that unconsciously
Exactly. I was
for
gonna say
forever.
you've been doing internal family systems this
Yeah.
whole time. Aw.
But actually that goes back to when you're looking for a therapist.
Yes.
If if you've tried types of therapy before or you don't know,
Yeah.
try something.
Yeah.
If you know something doesn't work for you, look for a therapist who specifically does not do that
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
or
And
has other modalities.
feel
And
comfortable firing your therapist or telling your therapist, I don't like this.
yes,
Yeah. Yeah. So important. I love that you found IFS because it's like perfect for a fiction writer.
it really is. And it's been such a life changer for me to take take it out of, oh, I'm crazy and I'm talking to characters in my head, to, no, wait, this is an actual valid therapeutic system.
Yeah. You're like, oh, what I'm doing is awesome. It's
I'm
just
I'm
like,
not just, off
yeah.
the rocker. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And it makes so much sense that we have parts of us that are like almost frozen in time and that are still like playing such a role in our day to day. And
It's we're made up of our memories and our
yeah,
experiences.
yeah,
And so those will obviously continue to live within us in
yeah,
some capacity.
yeah.
And so acknowledging and interacting with that, like it makes sense to me.
And I love what you acknowledged, which was that like fighting the thought and telling the thought like you're not true and I'm gonna like shut you down is so much harder than like coming to the part and being like, hey honey, like I'm sorry you're feeling this way. Like that just sucks that you don't feel like you're worth anything and like tell me more, you know?
Where's this coming from? What can I do to help?
Yeah.
How can we get over this together? And I
Yeah.
know CBT works great for some people.
For some people. I don't know if it works for
Um,
neurodiverse people, honestly.
it doesn't. There have actually been a couple studies
Really?
recently. Of course, I'm not going to remember where I found them.
Yeah,
I remember discussing them.
later if you find those, I'd be so into reading those because I feel like it did not work for me either. Like
Um,
dialectical behavioral therapy and IFS is what
I
has
have,
ended up working for
yeah,
me.
I have a lot
But
better experience with DBT. Um, yeah, from what I remember, it's basically CBT does not work nearly as effectively for neurodivergent people.
that's so empowering, right? Because I think obviously like queer neurodiverse people and people of all experiences who have been othered and like experience active discrimination, I feel like all of these things heighten your experience of depression and anxiety, of
Oh,
course. And then you go into traditional talk therapy, and 9 times out of 10, it is going to be a white cis person who has experienced privilege in so many ways and then has like been trained in this thing that's based off study and research with white cis like people who have
well, and
experienced privilege,
even beyond traditional talk therapy, when you're looking at mental health apps or mental health websites,
all of
or
it.
it's all CBT based, which honestly pisses me off no end.
Yeah. So this is something I haven't heard people talk about. And it like immediately as the words came out of your mouth, my like something in me was like, oh, thank you. Because for so many of us, that model just it doesn't click, it doesn't help. And yet people who really do need help and support are, trying to reach out for it and then feeling like, why is this not working?
It's not you,
Oof.
it's the system.
Yay. So, like, if you had, like, would you say, like, reach for IFS in your experience is what you,
I mean, for me, yes, IFS is definitely my favorite modality that I've done so far. But it really depends on who you are and how you think.
yeah. So maybe
So
just
for me,
that
my advice
empowerment of like, look for what works for you.
is don't be afraid to try different things.
Yeah.
Um, it seems like CBT is all there is. It's not.
Yeah.
And it might take a little bit longer to find someone or some resources that are not CBT based. But if you can find something that works a lot better for you, it makes a huge difference.
I love
Like,
that.
I cannot imagine where I would be if I was with a CBT therapist
Yeah.
and with a lot of the things that I'm dealing with. Because it makes me feel like I'm just irrational. And
Right.
I'm
Like you're saying you don't make sense.
I'm broken because my brain is saying one thing and my emotions are saying another thing versus with IFS, I can say, okay, my brain is this part and my emotion is this part.
Mm-hmm.
What's the disconnect? How
Mm-hmm.
do we take this part and work together to feel better or to get over this emotional hurdle or to do whatever we need to do?
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. I use parts work and I'm not a therapist. I'm like a coach and I work with multiple parts and seeing if they can have conversations. And it's always so beautiful because it's like there's a lot of opposition within ourselves,
Oh,
right?
there is. Yeah.
And there's a lot of like fighting for power. Like different parts will be like, I'm in charge. No, I'm in charge, and like trying to crush each other. And when we introduce them to each other and say, like, friends, like it or not, we're driving the same bus.
Mhm.
Like we are
How do
all
you make
on the
this fit
same
for
bus.
everybody?
Yeah. we
Yeah.
we cannot break the bus apart. Like we are all on the bus and like how do we not just like drive ourselves in circles or crash ourselves?
Yeah.
Like
We need to make it to our destination in one piece. How do we do this?
choose a common destination to start with. Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So sounds like therapy has been a huge support in your life and writing and being able to connect with characters and being able to like heal your own self through the characters that you create and creating meaning through offering that to other people. Like are there other big things that you support yourself with?
I mean, my cats are big ones.
Yay.
I before I moved last year, I actually got them both certified, not certified. I got a letter for both of them to be emotional support animals because of
Yay.
how much of a difference they make in my life.
That's beautiful.
Um, I mean, even just something as basic as keeping to routine.
Totally. They have to eat, so that means I probably need to eat.
They
Like,
have to eat. I have to clean the litter box every day. So
yes,
if I do this chore and then clean the litter box, I make sure that chore gets done.
yes.
Um, and luckily, they're both super snuggly.
That's
So I have
beautiful.
the stress reduction of having the cat and then the cat fur, also
Yes.
scientifically proven. Um,
Totally.
Uh, yeah, I mean, those are kind of the big ones of the therapy, the medication, the friends, the cats, making sure that I have enough time on my own, because I'm
Mm-hmm.
an introvert. But I also just like my mind's always going, and it's a lot easier to sit there and actually consider my thoughts if I'm not distracted with other people and other things going on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so making sure that I have time with just me or just me and the cats is also really important to me.
That's beautiful. Amazing. I don't think you mentioned the medication. So you've had a relationship with medication that's been
Oh yeah, that was
positive.
another thing I was really, really against for a while.
Yeah, that can be really something that a
Um,
lot of people feel really scared of, or like firmly they don't want to interact with. Like
I
if you have time, I'd love to hear a little bit
Yeah,
about how you
when I
navigated that.
first started therapy, I was like, okay, I'm gonna just do talk therapy. It's gonna be great. I won't need any medication. Um, it'll be fine. I'm just gonna do therapy. And then therapy helped, but not as much as I was hoping.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it took probably a month or two of my therapist being like, "Hey, have you talked to your doctor about maybe considering some antidepressants?"
Mm-hmm.
For me to finally go, okay, fine. Therapy's not getting me to the point I want. I'm
Yeah.
still feeling really, really awful.
Yeah.
I'm still really just like hating everything.
Yeah.
Um, and luckily, I have a really, really great PCP, primary care practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to her first and I said, hey, I'm in talk therapy. I know that that's the first thing you recommend,
Mm-hmm.
um, but it's not doing what I want. My therapist suggested that I do medication. And I was really, really anxious
Yeah.
that it would change who I was or
Right.
stop me from feeling or like any of those
Or
bad
impact your
stereotypes.
creativity with your writing.
Yeah. Um, and I went through three different ones before finding one that worked for me.
Amazing. I mean, I'm
Um,
sure that was hard, but I'm glad you said that because that's another piece that people can be like, I tried one and I didn't like it.
yeah. Well, I tried two different ones with my PCP before finally finding a psychiatrist.
Mm-hmm.
Because I also wanted to talk about ADHD medication and things of that
Mm-hmm.
nature, in addition to an antidepressant.
Yeah.
Um, I went through three antidepressants before finding one that worked for me. I went through almost every ADHD medication you can think of, um, stimulants, non-stimulants, things that aren't technically for ADHD but help ADHD.
Uh-huh.
Um, Nothing worked until I found a new. Well, not my doctor found a new one, um, that just got FDA approved like 2 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And it's the first ADHD non-stimulant medication to be FDA approved in like 20 years.
Wow.
And I can actually focus again. It's
What
amazing.
what's that one called, if you don't mind?
It's called Qelbree, Qelbree. Um,
Interesting. Yeah. You know, there's a lot of people who listen to this podcast are like pretty in the woo woo world. And there's a lot of stigma in the regular world about medication, but there's a lot of stigma in the like spiritual, like woo woo
oh
world
yeah, 100%.
around
I'm
it
also
too.
kind of woo-woo.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
And I feel like, especially as a neurodiverse person, like giving myself permission for accommodations has been one of the like biggest turning points of my life, is saying like, I need these things. I like, of course, in an ideal fantasy world, I would love it if like I just like was a superhero and could handle everything like just eating spinach. Okay. But
okay, Popeye.
yeah, I would like to be Popeye, apparently. But since I'm not Popeye, like, how can I, the catchphrase of DBT that I love so much is build a life worth living. Like, how can I make it worthwhile to be on this planet since that's apparently what I have to do right now?
Dang it. Um, yeah, that's a really good point because I was for a while, I was so determined to just like, okay, I can power through. I don't need medication. I don't need therapy. I don't need to have my cats be emotional support animals. I don't need to be able to work with non-fluorescent lights.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I need to be able to work from home with a flexible schedule so I can take
Right.
a nap in the middle of the day
Right.
because my
Right.
medication makes me sleepy.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm still working on that. It's really, really
Hmm.
hard to accept that A, it's okay to ask for those things,
Yep.
and B, I am worth asking for those
Yes.
things. Um, but it is really important. And if you have the ability and the opportunity to ask for those, freaking do it, man. Like the
Yes.
stigma is always going to be there.
Yeah.
People are always going to say, oh, well, I did XYZ, so why can't you XYZ?
Yeah.
Or, this medicine didn't work for me, so it's not going to work for you. Or, people are always going to have a negative to
Like,
it.
why don't you just meditate more and
Oh my
like
God, I will punch you in the face if you tell me to meditate more. I'm not a violent person. I will punch you in the face. Meditate more or just go
like,
outside.
have you tried a gratitude journal?
No, like, okay, I have physical issues. I can't go
Yes.
hiking. I can't do yoga for more than 5 minutes at a time without killing
Yes.
myself.
Yes.
Um, like I have trouble breathing if
Yeah.
I'm walking for more than 10 minutes. I can't
Yes.
do these things that you say will fix my problems.
Yes.
And even if I could, they wouldn't fix my
Yeah.
problems.
Yeah. Thank you. It's so valuable. And it's so like, I love that you named all those things. Like, those were all things that I was pushing up against, like fluorescent lights and like working 8 to 5, like all these like weird ideas. And, I've come to find that like, I definitely can't be with any overhead lights, like ever. I have to work from home. Like, I can have very limited interaction with humans. Like, I can only work half of a day. Like,
Most people can't
period.
work a full 8-hour day.
Yeah.
There are so many studies um, that even neurotypical people can really only be productive for about 4 hours at a time, tops, and that's pushing it.
Right.
Um, and then you add in neurodivergency, and I have maybe half an hour at a time, and that's not because ADHD focus. That's how much juice my brain has at any given time. Because I'm also coping with how do I exist in a world that inherently wants me to die
Yeah.
as a queer neurodivergent person.
Yeah. I was going to say, then put like gender dysphoria on top of it, and you're
Yeah,
just
and it
toast.
it takes a lot of brain power, and people don't often consider that
Totally.
just existing
Yeah.
takes a lot of brain power, especially if you're marginalized in any way.
Oh my gosh.
And I could rant for hours about society's emphasis on productivity as self-worth,
Yeah. Yeah.
but self-worth is not defined on productivity.
Yeah.
And
It,
if you can only work half a day, if you can not work at all, that does not affect your worth as a human being. You are still worthy of support, of care, of love, of having a safe place to live, of medical care, food,
yeah.
like decent respect. None of that is dependent on what you can or want to give back to society.
Yeah.
And if anyone tells you different, I will punch them in the face for you.
Okay. We will send them to you. Yeah.
Come here.
None of those things are earnable.
No,
Like all
they're
of those things are just inherent. Yeah, 2000%. I so agree with you. And thank you for naming all of those pieces, because I think it's so important for people to hear. I tell my kid, who is getting just like saturated by all these ideas, right, from public schools and society. And I tell him all the time, like, do you know why I'm proud of you? Because you're here. Like, that is why I'm proud of you, just because you're here. And translating that into, if you don't have someone who's telling you that, like we're telling you that today, you can message us and we'll remind you. But also like I love like my biggest takeaway from this conversation is create a character that will tell you that, because that is, I feel like, the power of fiction, right? Is that actually this whole fucking thing that we're doing is fiction. Like it is a
I
thousand
mean,
percent
we
our
create
like
our own realities, even like to the extent of, my plushie. I experience this plushie different than anyone else would
ah,
because my senses are different than anyone else.
oh my gosh,
Anything we
that's so
consider
beautiful.
objective reality is still filtered through our subjective brain.
Oh my god, I love that.
We create our own reality.
Yeah.
So who's to say that I can't create a fictional character to tell me that I'm doing a good job?
Oh my gosh, that's my favorite thing. That I'm so excited about, like fleshing out this beautiful unicorn that is gonna be my new
Please
like.
send it to me. I want to
I'm
read your story.
okay. Okay, I will. It's like this is gonna be my new passion project. I'm so excited about it, and
That makes me
uh,
so happy.
I know. I'm thrilled. I'm ecstatic. And I just feel like giving this to everyone is such a beautiful thing because there is no circumstance, there's no reality in which you could not create you know, your own guardian angel, your own like best friend who's gonna encourage you and support you. And I just love how accessible that is. I
I'm
feel
not going
like,
to say that it's always the easiest because if you are in a really, really, really difficult situation, sometimes it can be really hard to
yeah,
imagine anything positive.
yeah,
But for me, at least, it's a lot easier to externalize and imagine an external positive force than to try and make myself feel positive.
yeah. And you could, I think you could even choose, you did it through this video game, but you could also do it through like a TV character too,
I've
like
had
a,
friends do it for Lord of the Rings.
yeah, yeah,
Um, yeah, any piece of media that speaks to you, if it speaks to you and there's something in it that you find inspiring or connecting or useful for getting you through the shit times, use it.
exactly. Even if it's just 1 hour that it works for, like take it, take any and all.
That's still an hour of some sort of positive
Yes,
versus, wanting to die. And
exactly.
sometimes that hour, that 15 minutes can make the biggest change.
Oh my gosh, because yeah, our chemicals are changing like so rapidly, and sometimes it's only an hour that you need to get through in order to like get to a little bit of wherewithal to be able to be like, okay, yeah, I'm okay being on the planet. Like I'm not thrilled about being on the planet, but like I
But I can get through it.
yes, my
Yeah.
favorite thing about DBT is it's like just getting through the next 5 minutes, and if that's all you can do, then just really focus on that because you may not be able to envision like a 20-year future, but like just getting through 5 minutes can be really a worthwhile thing and whatever
Music.
works.
Sorry, that's another big coping mechanism
Yeah.
about turning up music. Um, I have a couple specific playlists for like when I'm having a panic attack
Oh my gosh,
that
that's
are all just
brilliant.
music that I find really soothing or I find easy to count my breaths to.
Oh my gosh, I
Um,
love that.
that have helped me from going full blown panic attack.
Yeah.
Um, I have some playlists for, I'm feeling shitty and I need to listen to sad music.
Yeah. Yeah.
Music is really, really emotive
Hmm.
and also again, with great internet access, there are so many songs about anything you can think of now. Like there are songs about Dungeons and Dragons. There are songs about being queer, being trans, being non-binary. Um, there's Steven Universe has the song "Here Comes a Thought." Steven Universe is a TV show.
I'm
If you
gonna look
haven't
that up.
watched it, it deals with mental health issues really, really well.
Awesome.
It's technically a kid's show,
Hmm.
but it's one of my favorites. I have it tattooed on my arm.
Oh my gosh, I love
Uh,
it.
so there's a song called "Here Comes a Thought," which is on my anxiety playlist, which is a character dealing with an anxiety attack
Wow.
and how their mentor helps them through it.
Oh my
Like,
gosh.
and you can find things like this that you couldn't find before. And
Yeah.
sometimes just hearing it through music is a completely different experience than just hearing someone say words at you.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So music's another big one for me
Okay.
for
Yeah,
getting
I'm
through
so glad you
life.
mentioned that. Yeah,
Yeah.
because the other cool thing about music is it captures a moment, like it captures like a 5-minute window. And you can
Mhm.
be like I've often given myself the like, okay, you just have to listen to like this one song. And then it's like, okay, I know the song's gonna end. Like I know it's only so long and it can again get me
That's
through
what
5 more
reminded me of
minutes.
it, actually, was we were
Yeah.
talking about getting through 5 minutes. Okay, I'm going to put on this one song that I know makes me feel a certain way.
Uh-huh.
I will have that feeling for that amount of time, and then I can try to move on.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that we both use that as like a container. It's like you are allowed to like
Also good
scream
for
and cry for
timing a
5 minutes.
chore.
Oh yeah.
Like make a playlist for like half an hour. I'm doing chores to this half-hour playlist. When the playlist is done, I'm done. Doesn't matter
Yeah.
where I'm at, I'm done.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
I'm not very good at sticking to it, but it's
Yeah.
a good idea.
I'm like, I think my playlist would need to be one song, but I like the idea.
Yeah,
Uh, these are all so beautiful, and I am aware of our time. I feel like I could keep
I'm not, so
talking
I'm glad
for
you are.
like, oh, good. Yeah, I feel like I could definitely keep talking to you for a really long time. So maybe I'll have you back at some point if you would be willing. But thank you for sharing so openly and so generously. It's really just such a gift. And
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to.
oh yeah.
'Cause, I mean, it's one of the things I'm passionate about
Mm,
is mental health and helping other people because I didn't have that help.
yeah,
And a lot of people don't.
for sure.
And if I can provide even just a little bit, then I feel better about myself.
Well, yeah, it creates meaning, right? And
Yes.
then that also helps reinforce the like, why am I having to be here? Like if I can make it meaningful,
And,
then
and it also helps provide the ripples of
yes.
help you, you help someone else, they help someone else.
Yeah.
And I think that it's the little things that help us get through the day, and it's the little things that eventually make the biggest change.
Oh my gosh, I totally agree. I think the biggest way that we can impact the world is to be kind to ourselves. And that exactly, like when we are a little bit healthier, a little bit more whole, we do offer such a big impact to the whole world through those ripples. So thank you so much. Where can people find you? Where can they find the books? All that good stuff.
Yeah, if you go to O.E. Tearmann, which is O as an Oscar, E as an elephant, T as in train, EAR, M as in man, A as an apple, in Nancy.com.
I'll put it in the
Yeah,
description.
like
Yeah,
all those letters sound the same. Um, you can find ways to contact both me and my co-writer Olivia, as well as buy the books, find our social media,
perfect.
find my personal stuff, anything you can. It's all there, all on that website.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, I will definitely put that in the description. And your eighth book is coming out when?
We're aiming for July.
Okay,
Fingers crossed. It still needs to
exciting.
get the beta readers and things, so it might be a little bit later, but sometime this summer.
Okay, exciting. Amazing. Well, go check them out and all these. I'm going to definitely be checking out the books. I think maybe it would be a cool thing for me to read with my 12-year-old. Do you think?
There are explicit sex scenes.
All right,
So
maybe in a few
that's gonna really,
years.
it's really gonna depend on you as a parent.
Maybe he
Not
reads them by
really tell you to read
himself.
your 12-year-old explicit sex, but I
Maybe
can't
14.
stop you either.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird thing because they're exposed to sex, you know? And so I feel like being able to do it not in secret without like being shamed about it is a really
Well, and
important.
they are all queer sex, not all, mostly queer sex scenes.
Yeah. Isn't all sex queer? Like
I mean, you're not wrong. It's not specifically cis het sex scenes like you're gonna see, in
yeah.
Hollywood movies. movies.
Well, I feel like
And it is
maybe it'll
all very
be,
much character building scenes.
yeah, yeah, it's not just sex. Well,
It's
maybe
not
I will read them for the next year and then I will pass them on to my child, like 13, 14. I feel like we're ready for reading about sex.
once they're a little bit more in there.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, amazing. Thank you so, so much. And I'm gonna end
No,
the recording and then we can have like an actual goodbye. Okay.